Chorus Voices, the podcast brought to you by Chorus, a fresh approach to community service. Settle in, listen in, and enjoy the voices who bring you reflections, musings, and stories from our community.
Welcome to this episode of Chorus Voices. Hello, Lou.
Hi, Dan.
How things been going for you this week?
Pretty good. It's been a busy week.
We've decided today we're going to have a bit of a chat about brand. It's a very often used word, probably means lots of different things to lots of different people. So what is a brand?
Well, I was reflecting on this, Dan, and when we had the chat about culture in our first episode, we said it's the way we do things around here, and we were just reflecting at a recent meal. Often brands are how people talk about you when you're not in the room.
Yes.
So you don't get the choice. It's how people see you and think about you and talk about you.
And part of that conversation we were having was that, you know, if you ever overheard someone talking about your brand, probably half the time they're not saying very particularly nice things about you, because the expectation is that you're good to deal with, and the only conversation is when you're not.
That hygiene factor, which is probably what we're going for, often is promoting all the stuff that people just expect anyway.
We are really trying to carve out something a bit different in Chorus. We talk about it being a fresh approach to community service. So we'll talk in a little while about the process we went through to come up with our name and what we're trying to do with our brand Chorus. But let's start with a quick recap on a recent trip that you had to go to a conference, not in the community service sector, and talking about brands in general. Tell us about the conference.
It was actually a wonderful opportunity because I've been going to our sector conferences for over a decade, and as much as I love them, it was very nice to spend a couple of days with a completely different crowd. I went.
It's where some of the freshest ideas come from, really.
Absolutely, yeah. And so it was the Brand Forum in Sydney, and it's an annual forum with people from across the world coming to talk about branding, but also marketing and communications and content. But what was just so inspiring was the mix of people there, global brands, the awe-inspiring, and people from all over the world there as delegates as well. So the likes of Google, Facebook, and HP, and
just a bit intimidating.
A little bit intimidating, but wonderful. And the woman at DreamWorks talked about the How to Train Your Dragon suite. It's not just a film; it's a whole kind of franchise. And what I liked about what they did was really engaged with their audience, and they had a few segments, and there was the kind of 10-year-old girls, there was younger boys, but there was also adults that were quite into that. And so they had these segments, and they did lots of co-creation, a bit like Lego have done, put an idea out there to their customers, get feedback, do a kind of competition, and they'll co-create something together.
So the sort of the image and the brand of an organisation or a franchise is developed in conversation with the people who are most impacted by it or most interested in it.
Indeed. And the other thing that's kind of parallel to that was how you build a global brand that's consistent but also locally relevant. So they did that quite well, and a number of others. Kontiki also talked about this. You have to have consistency in the brand, but it also has to be locally relevant. We had that conversation about KFC as well, didn't we?
And that's right. And we did, obviously, at the moment at least, Chorus is a Western Australian organisation, but it's something we talk a little bit about. Having some sense of consistency, but at the same time, it's a brand that has a very local relevance and feel to it.
And we want people to relate to it in a way that's meaningful for them. It's not, a stamp on your hand. You've been chorus-ified. It's not such a word, but it's where do you get the balance between consistency but some kind of, adaptability or individuality in it. Make it your own.
What were your 2 or 3 takeaways from the conference?
I think the pace of digital and how organisations, companies can keep up with that was the biggest takeaway. And not just digital in what people are using, but how they're using it. And this, people want to be able to engage with a brand almost on an individual level. And I think if you've got very big brands in retail, they've got the money and the resources to be able to have technology that can, push content to you that's tailored, and we might not be there yet, but it really just helped me see that everything we do in the future needs to be thinking about those individuals and what they see in our brand and what they will want. Even for us, if it's just talking to people on Facebook and responding to them individually, we always write one of our names. If we're communicating with people on Facebook, we'll put Louise, Chorus.
So it's a bit of a personal signature to it. Yeah.
Otherwise, it just feels a bit generic. It's just a company. I know a lot of interesting stories have come about through people that have kind of taken that kind of thing, that conversation for a brand. In a different space, there was a young guy on work experience for, I think it was for one of the rail companies in England, and so he was on their Twitter feed, and so he had his initials, and he just kind of went to fame for his 1 week of work experience. He was a Twitter star because people were asking him questions, and he just had a bit of a sense of humour, and then people started asking him, what's the meaning of life, and they had quite a good fun with it, and I think he ended up on TV for that week. But I think it's some personality, but it's got to be consistent with the brand. You can play a bit.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier, and when we were talking about culture on a previous podcast, we did make the connection between a brand and the culture that we have internally. And we start our conversations about culture with our manifesto, but really the manifesto started as a product of our brand discovery sort of journey, didn't it?
We worked with an agency called Rare, and they introduced us to the brand manifesto model and the Lighthouse brand model before that, which was really looking at what belief does your brand have, and its purpose and its product, and then I can't remember what they're called in the middle, but that was really kind of the essence, I think, of your brand. So we used the Lighthouse brand model and the brand manifesto together when we were working with Rare, and it took quite a bit of time to get that Lighthouse brand built, and backwards and forwards between a group of us and the board, and also using all the feedback from the many people, up to 1,000 people that were involved in the input for that. And the belief for a brand, I think what was interesting for me was that can't be just what we believe our brand to be. It has to be consistent with what customers and the general public believe your brand to be.
Yeah, and our people within Chorus, volunteers and staff as well, because obviously in the service business, there's no real difference between the service we provide and the people providing the service. So it needs to come from within, really. And I remember having that conversation with the design agency, with Rare, and sort of setting our target on, let's talk to the people who will embody this brand, and then in terms of how we might promote it or use it as a marketing tool, we'll build from there. And we did have a point in time where we had to sort of decide whether we would move rapidly and do this with a small group, or move more slowly and do it with a large group, and we landed on the latter, didn't we?
We did, after a little bit of consideration and a little bit of advice from Richard.
So we had a bit of a chat with Richard Beards from Rare, and asked him what his experience of working with us was like, and the journey to come up with the brand Chorus.
Yeah, look, I've been doing this for more years than I care to mention, and you know what? You never stop learning, but this was a real challenge. Merging 3 entities into one is never going to be easy, but when it's 3 community care organisations, the challenge is actually amplified, because the people involved are so much more personally invested in the process. The good news is that that a brand can often be that vehicle that merging organisations can use to unify groups under a kind of single cohesive banner of harmony. But of course, the danger is that if you mess it up, the brand committee will have a kind of level of discord and mutiny on their hands. But if you get it right, actually they'll be the unsung perfect matchmakers. We realised very early on that every single person in this organisation was not just vaguely interested in the process, but incredibly passionate about what this newly merged organisation would be called, how it would look, how it would all work, and ultimately what it would stand for. They literally all wanted to know. And from my experience, as admirable as this is, it's often a very dangerous place to start, because naming, fonts, colours, logos, in fact, any creative execution becomes very personally subjective. And if you're not careful, mass opinion results in what I call beige branding. You're trying to please everybody, but actually you end up pleasing nobody at all. So the process that we adopted needed to be far more than just design and creativity, and more aligned to discovery and definition of common purpose, which in turn then is expressed through a name, a look, a feel, etc. What that does is that focus dilutes the subjectivity of the stakeholders, and everyone is far more willing to gather around a kind of shared umbrella of purpose and feel a sense of pride in that unity, and not so worried about what colour the logo is, or indeed what the name is. The process for Chorus was intense. What would normally take 6 to 12 months or more was actually completed in a fraction of that time. This was in part due to the help and unlimited availability of the client at every level from the board down, but it was done properly and with no corners cut. From memory, the final brand strategy and the brand execution was actually agreed at a late night emergency board meeting literally weeks before the launch, so we cut it really fine. Then all that was left was the small matter of the big reveal to the staff and stakeholders, which is always a very nervous time, but on that momentous night under the big tent at the zoo, the stage was set, and the anticipation in the room was actually palpable. In all my years, I can honestly say that I've never felt such emotion at a brand launch. And when the final Chorus brand was revealed, the room spontaneously erupted into a mixture of applause, cheers, tears, laughter, and of course the odd, not sure about that. But I think overall it was well received on the night, and for me the greatest testament of a brand success is that today you can't imagine Chorus being called anything else other than Chorus. So clearly it's worked. At Rare, we're incredibly proud of our contribution to this young upstart of a brand. Chorus is truly reinventing the sector, and most impressive of all is that as an outsider, it appears to me that from the ground up, everyone is living the vision, the values and the purpose that we help the team define. This is actually what it's all about for us, and it's the thing that gets us out of bed every morning.
That was Richard Beards. There were more people than Rare involved in this process, wasn't there? Why don't you tell us about other steps that we took to come up with this name?
It was an interesting collaboration, actually. We worked also with a research agency in town called Painted Dog, and they specialise in our community and not-for-profit or for-purpose research. And it was a really nice fit, even though we were working with two agencies. The Chorus, who was not named then, obviously.
Mergeco,
our kind of code name. Mergeco, Painted Dog, and Rare. I thought the relationship worked really, really well, and we all had our part to play. So Painted Dog helped us really investigate the brand equity that the three brands had from the three organisations, and also what attributes those brands had and what attributes people thought the new merger could and should bring and embody. So it was a really interesting exercise, which over 1,000 people were involved in all up. There was over 800 people from the general population in Western Australia surveyed, and over 300 Chorus customers, volunteers, staff, and that included management and board as well.
A number of workshops and activities, and people being asked to draw pictures and talk about colours and talk about symbols.
Yeah.
And we did sort of make a discovery quite early that the former names, while they were sort of trusted and admired by a relatively small number of people, they weren't widely known. So at that point we made the call that we would go to a new brand, but we wanted to try and link it to the, as you said, the attributes and the history of the other three organisations. It sounds like a sort of a a somewhat messy and organic process, which is exactly what it felt
Well, it
like. And we had set ourselves a date of revealing the new name internally, of being the 31st of August, and we'd booked the tent at the zoo and we'd invited everybody, but we still didn't have a name till just a few weeks beforehand.
3 weeks beforehand.
And then the production that had to happen between landing on a name and getting to that night was fairly tight, I think.
In fact, the 31st of August was supposed to be the full launch of the brand.
Yes.
And I think in the process we adapted it to be the reveal, which in the end worked perfectly, I think, because 300 plus staff and volunteers who came to that night were in the tent at the zoo.
Yeah, they were.
And it was nice. I think sometimes things just work out better than you could have planned them. And it gave us a couple of months to really work with staff and volunteers to get on board, so that when we did launch in October, everyone was behind it, which I think worked really well in the end.
And it was a great feeling that night, and I think that there were some people who were less inspired than others by the new name, but we did get a real sense of excitement, and that leads us to talk a little bit about how you go about promoting and building a brand. You're a small organisation, a for-purpose organisation. We're not going to be throwing masses of money at this. So what have we been doing with the Chorus brand in the time since then to try and get it out there and make it meaningful?
I think being a human services organisation, and like you say, a for-purpose, budget-limited organisation, our main priority has been our people, and we've really worked hard to engage staff and volunteers in the brand and to understand what that means. We worked with the brand book originally. We've more recently launched what we call the song book, which is key messaging about Chorus. How do you talk about Chorus? What does it mean? Which is very much based on the ethos of the manifesto, that egalitarian approach to working with people by their side. I think that really helped. We were probably a little bit late with that song book. We had people in the business saying, what do I say? How do I explain it? What words do I use? So they were very thirsty for that book. So we've really engaged our people, and we've taken our time and collaborated with people along the way to make sure that they're comfortable and on board. And our T-shirts will be a classic example of vast collaboration. But I think that's paid off because people left, right, and centre. We're both wearing our Chorus T-shirts today, and everywhere you go, people are wearing them and a little bit frustrated that they only have one and they're having to wash them. And
yes, and this sort of what this has achieved is a degree of, as you say, kind of ownership of the brand already. But it's authentic, right? And again, we're not pretending that everybody loves it. I had a conversation with a volunteer recently who felt that it was a poor choice, and we talked through the ups and downs and how we got there. And even the fact that he'd taken the time to provide that feedback meant that we were at least putting the brand out there and people cared about it.
And we're consistent because everyone's voice is heard at Chorus.
Part of it, absolutely. But there's a real authenticity to that approach, which I think is starting to flow into practical things. One of the things that I hadn't really anticipated, but now look at it, it was kind of obvious, is that the first place we're seeing a bit of impact of this very new brand, Chorus, is in, the market for people who might like to come and work for us. And I had a conversation recently with Craig Hanlon, who is in the Disability Employment Services team, and he was saying he'd noted a real shift in the way people were thinking about Chorus and how interested they were in coming to work for us.
Something that has really stood out to me recently when speaking with some of the applicants we've had for roles with Chorus is that they were well aware of Chorus, and this was part of the reason that they chose to apply for the role. Previously, we've found it really hard to attract applicants from other organisations because we didn't have the visibility we have now being Chorus.
It's great to get that feedback from Craig and the interest in the Disability Employment Services. And I recently attended one of our new induction programs or days for new Chorus staff, and I asked the group a question at the end of the session. What was it that attracted you to Chorus? And between then and now, in your first few weeks in the job, what sorts of things have really kind of clinched it for you? And the feedback was really interesting. It was very much based on values alignment for everyone, and we had people from finance, people from gardening, people from service delivery, and people in culture. So it's quite a broad mix, about 8 or 9 people. But pretty much everyone chose Chorus because they felt that our value proposition around values was very clear. And there was a couple of comments about how in the recruitment process, the interview process, or things that they saw about our brand were very consistent. So we weren't just saying it, we were actually walking the talk as well. And the videos that we've been doing since the beginning, and I've been doing for a few years, have been really popular. I think pretty much everybody in that room had looked at the website, had watched some of the videos, and a couple of the people had said they'd sat and watched a couple of hours of the videos, like watched every single one. And they particularly appreciated your comments, Dan. I think that's really important when the CEO and personality and messaging is really clear. You can write something, but seeing and hearing someone say it from the heart is a completely different thing. And we have done some quite open videos when we've talked about tough processes that we've been doing internally. And we haven't promoted those videos, but we haven't made them private either. So I think that's our principle of, you might have internal messaging, but in today's fluid world, anything internal could probably end up being seen externally, so you have to be comfortable with it. And there was a comment that people found that our honesty in what challenges are ahead and how we were approaching them told us that we were the kind of organisation they wanted to be part of.
So I hadn't actually heard of Chorus before, and when I found out that that was a company I was going to go and have an interview for, I did actually get an opportunity to have a look at the website. And on the short video that I saw about the company, one of the things that really stuck out to me was empowering and respecting individuals and working as equals. That really appealed to me. It was something that really talked to my values. Not just about, obviously, the customers and how we treat customers, but how we treat each other within a workplace. So another really pleasing aspect was finding out that the company, for a not-for-profit organisation, had put so much time and effort into getting an external provider to help them with culture and do culture checks. And in my interview process, the 2 people I interviewed with spoke about that extensively. And that, to me, was just about walking the talk as far as I was concerned. That was absolutely, from my point of view, it was something that I was really looking for in terms of an organisation, being authentic, transparent, and just that constant communication in a company that's merging and going through so much change. There seemed to be really honest, transparent conversations from the CEO down. That this is what we're doing, and at any stage, if you have any concerns, let us know. And we'll let you know as soon as we know. So to me, that was really valuable.
Well, when I was actually looking for a new role, one of the main things that was important to me was finding a company that had a very healthy culture and an appetite for change. My previous workplace had an undesirable culture and not something that did not fit in with my value system, and quite a rigid structure that wasn't willing or able to change. When looking for a job and I came across the Chorus role, I was a little bit excited by the advert. It was very colourful, it was very promising, and for me that was quite intriguing, mainly because I wanted to find a company that wanted me as much as I wanted to work for them. And the advert sort of came across that way. It came across very inviting, and the type of person they were looking for is exactly what I perceive myself as. So throughout the recruitment process, from the application stage right through to being offered an interview and the successful position, the one thing that I was really impressed with was not only the turnaround time, but the level of communication from the interviewing managers throughout the process. And it was either through people and culture or through the managers that were actually contacting me in person. It wasn't just a sterile department. I actually heard from my now manager, and I also heard from people and culture. So I felt like the organisation was not really hierarchically structured. It was quite a flat organisation, which I've since found out that's completely true. And you could really feel that throughout the process. One thing that really impressed me, because as I explained before, I was very much wanting a company that was to put as much effort into developing me professionally as I was to put back into the company. My now manager phoned me to say that I was the successful applicant, and it was really how she told me that was the deal sealer for me. I was, I listened to what she said, and it was absolutely... it's unheard of, really, in today's industry. She said things like, we are really excited to offer you the role. We think you're a really great fit for the organisation and for our team. We would love you to come and join us. And it's hearing words like that when you are looking for another role, when you are looking for something better than what you have, that really make the huge difference.
So there are some examples of how, in the early days of the life of the brand Chorus, it's actually hitting the ground in some sense. We're doing a number of what you might think of as more traditional promotional activities. There's been the radio ads, and we're shortly going to be, overhauling the signage across the organisation on buildings and cars and things like that. So we hope that continues to push the message out there again on a relatively limited budget, and we'll be trying to find ways of, encouraging word of mouth and other networks to pick up the Chorus name and brand and own it.
I think content marketing for us is key. It's really about what we're saying and the why behind the kind of content that we produce. It's it's the amplification that costs the money.
Right.
Print media, radio, certainly TV. It's not something we've approached, but if we can get really high quality, interesting content that people want to engage with, then I think that's how our brand is going to really develop and grow.
Maybe we need to try and track down that British Rail work experience kid, ask him to start tweeting about us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So speaking of British Rail, there are some other brands out there and about. I was interested to know, Lou, whether there are any brands that kind of stick out for you and are quite meaningful for you, presumably not British Rail.
No, I haven't got very good memories of British Rail. I think our rail network in Perth is pretty good. Doesn't go very far, but
it's a bit simpler.
It's a bit simpler, but it works, which is great. When we were thinking about what brands were significant for us, I reflected on a clothes and homeware brand, Country Road, an Australian brand, and I don't really know how I kind of stumbled across liking them, but for some reason, for the last decade or more, they have been a consistent, reliable brand for me. I don't really enjoy shopping and not hugely fashion conscious in turning over wardrobe. So for me, their clothes have in that decade been consistently good quality, classic style, which means they're timeless. You have to keep replacing trends and fads. And probably most importantly, their customer service is just really high benchmark and very consistent. Any of the shops you go into across Australia, you have really good, not pushy, but really attentive, polite, helpful, engaged customer service, which seems to be lacking sometimes in WA, but also in Australian retail brands.
And it's hard to achieve. I mean, you've got all these stores all over the place, many different people working in them, and to get a consistent service experience is very, very difficult.
And like us in community service, often retail isn't highly paid. So how do you motivate your workforce to want to serve your customers? I'm not quite sure how they manage it. It'd be interesting to discover a bit more. But one thing that made me very pleased recently was I've been following a group called Femme Economy, which is a group based on female economy and the proviso that 85% of women make purchase decisions in a household. And so they have a list of brands that they assess twice annually on a criteria of the organisation either being 50% owned by women or at least 30% of women on the board. And really just with that, if women are making decisions, purchase decisions, then a company run and governed by women is just going to be more linked to the customer base and decision makers. So, like I said, I've been a customer of Country Road for 10 years, but I was really pleased with that. I think I put a comment on LinkedIn saying, pleased to know that I don't have to change that brand. That was helpful. So yeah, that's one that has resonated for me for a number of reasons. Yours is completely different though, isn't it?
Yeah. I was, I've been sort of really taken by the Perth Fringe Festival, which is a brand in its own right, which has really come from nothing, 2010, 2011, to now be the third biggest fringe festival in the world. And what I like about it is, well, to begin with, the sort of visual appeal of it. It's a fun, lively, sort of cartoonish kind of set of imagery that they use, and that just captures a slightly fantastic kind of feel, which is exactly what, when you go into a fringe environment, whether it's in the Northbridge area or into a particular theatre, that's exactly the same feel you get. It's got that kind of slightly unhinged carnival kind of feel to it. So I like that. What I really love about the Perth Fringe is what it's done to the city of Perth, and I think broadly to Western Australia. It's kind of bucked the stereotype, which is cultural backwater kind of thing, and created something that is really world class. I mean, and the nature of the Fringe is not every show is world class, but that's the point. It's a very organic experience. You go, you don't pay a lot of money to go, you don't have to pay anything. You can just go and hang out in the Fringe world or the garden areas and see interesting, mermaids swimming in tanks. Doesn't cost you anything. Who would have thought that was something to sort of get excited about? But it really, if you had said, whatever that is, 6-7 years ago, let's make Perth a world famous fringe festival, people, the suggestion would have been that's never going to work. Not in Perth, people aren't interested. And what they've done is created an experience and a brand that is the opposite of that. It's accessible, it's fun. Like I said, it's a little bit of a step out of reality and into a sort of hedonistic world. It's naughty, it's a bit rude, and those sorts of things are just very much against the grain of what people traditionally think of as Perth, the brand. And there's a link in there for me, for Chorus. We're wanting to bring a fresh approach, and it's against the grain to do some of the things we're trying to do. It's, and some will say that approach isn't going to work because people in that, industry are not interested in a fresh approach. I think even in the early days, we're seeing people are very interested in a fresh approach. It's what they're looking for. And I think we're creating something quite special. So, as we said, brand is a strange concept. People have been philosophising about it for decades, but it's a big part of our organisation, and it's a big part of the world in which we live.
And hopefully our listeners, when we're not in the room, say nice things about us. Fingers
crossed, and if they're able to provide that feedback to us, then that's even better. So, look, I've enjoyed the chat this morning, Lou.
Again, I have too.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks for listening to Chorus Voices, the podcast brought to you by Chorus. If you like our show and wanted to know more, check out our website at chorus.org.au. And please leave a review. We'd love to hear your feedback, and it helps others find us and enjoy the podcast as well. Join us next time for more inspiring stories and news from our community. Chorus, a fresh approach to community service.